Hello, we are live. This is Bold Like a Leopard, the Troll Tribune interview series. I'm here talking to Enric Llarch of the University of Barcelona. And why is it on this fabulous Sunday afternoon with the sun out? And I'm talking to somebody about a region of Europe that many Americans haven't even heard of. Well, I think personally that the Catalan referendum, which it is slated to decide whether Catalonia will become an independent country, could have implications for all of Europe and probably for the world at large. And I think that it's worth a look as to why it's such a burning issue this year. So first of all, welcome, Dr. Llarch. Could you please speak about your career and your specialty in economics and your relationship to the city of Barcelona?
Okay, first of all, thank you for your invitation, and I'm grateful to explain to American people what the situation in Catalonia and Barcelona. And well, I am an economist. I've been working at Barcelona County for many years, promoting economy, promoting local economy. I write at the main newspaper published in Barcelona, La Vanguardia, about economy. And during all these years, many times I've been writing and studying about relationships between economical relationships between Catalonia and Spain. And so from such reflections and the reflections of many others, nowadays there are many people who think that the best way for our future is independence.
Okay, and we are going to go through the history of Catalonia throughout this interview, why it is that it's a distinct part of Spain. It's not as if Spain is a continuous country that is homogeneous, the way people think about it. Let's start with Catalonia's structure within Spain. As of right now in the United States, we have states and municipalities and counties. So what is the relationship right now constitutionally between Catalonia and the rest of Spain?
Last 40 years, Spain became a decentralized state. It means all regions and all nations got some autonomy, mainly about expanding, not about incomes, but spending. It means that, for example, health and education are our duties, the duties of the autonomies, and this is the decentralization. But with the time, for us, we saw that that's not enough, and because economical relationships with Spain were not good, and Spanish government always tried to make this autonomy much lower all the time. So this is maybe good for other regions in Spain, but for a nation, because we consider us a nation, Catalonia, it's not fine at this moment. So we can we want to do a next step to the self-government through self-determination, and decide if we want to remain in Spain or we want to be independent.
Okay, and I'm going to frame this issue for terms that will be understandable for Americans. Now, in America, we have never had a particular region, except perhaps Louisiana or the Southwest in the early years, that was distinctly a different language and a different culture. Of course, there were the Native Americans. That's a different story. But separatism in the United States, we know of as in the Civil War. But that's not really a comparable case with Catalonia, because obviously the North and the South, they spoke the same language. It was really just a question of the structure of government. The most similar thing I can think of, and I don't know if you'll agree, Doctor, is the Irish Americans that came here because of British domination of Ireland. And that's really been an issue in Britain now that it's a modern country. It's more of a democratic system. You've had Scotland try to separate. You've had Wales asking for an independence referendum. Would you say that there are similarities between at least the cultural elements of those states and Catalonia and Spain?
Well, I think the most similar case to us is Scotland, and I think it's well known in the States because it's a known nation, a nation with its own language, own culture, and they want to rule by themselves. And they plan a referendum, and they agreed a referendum with the English government and with British government, and well, they lost. But maybe in some years they will make and they will do another referendum, and maybe they win. In fact, in relationship with America, I think that the most similar comparison we can do is the independence of United States in relationship with England, because in any moment, English people who went to live to America thought that they would be much better if they ruled by themselves, if the taxes were not so big, if their incomes remain in the country and didn't go to England. So for us is a very similar question. We think we will be much better. Our welfare state will be stronger, and our economy will grow much if we can rule by ourselves. We can retain our incomes, and we finish paying so much money to Spain. Paying much money that doesn't return in infrastructures and investments and so on.
Okay, so let's go to the history of Catalonia as a region and as you know, and the Catalan people. So based on the research that I've done, Catalonia just was not. It's not as if it started out as a region of Spain. It was a region during the Middle Ages, during the Muslim rule of Iberia, where you know, Charlemagne, the French emperor, he commissioned a number of nobles to form their own state under his sponsorship, and they became the Catalan counties, and eventually they became a principality. And in 1137, according to the sources I've seen, there was a union by marriage between the Queen of Aragon, Petronilla. Am I pronouncing her name right? Or
yes, yes.
Yeah, sorry, and Ramon Berenguer, and that was the first union of Catalonia with any other country. But it wasn't technically Spain, because if you really look at Spain as a country, it's not as if it has a single linguistic or cultural marker. There's Castile. A lot of Argentinians I know, they say they speak Castellano. They don't say Espanol. They say Castellano, because Castile is the most standard dialect. Castilian is the most standard dialect of Spanish that we know of. But there is Galician. There is, of course, there's the Basque country. Totally different thing going on there. Not even close to being the same as Spain. So then, eventually, during the 15th century, Aragon and Castile united under a different marriage, that of Ferdinand and Isabella, and modern Spain started to come to the fore. Now, do you think personally, or based on your studies, do you think that Catalonia was comfortable within this relationship during that period up until a different event that we're going to talk about? Do you think it was a comfortable relationship for the Catalan people, or was there already friction then?
Well, it's difficult to say, but for example, in 15th century, there was the dynastic union between the King of Catalonia and the Queen of Castilla. And, but it was just a union of kings. Not there was not a really state. There were not political organization in common. They were different. First, political organization common was Inquisition. You understand Inquisition?
Absolutely.
Okay. And the kings said, well, it has to be the Inquisition, and the Inquisition will be in Castilla, in Toledo, near Madrid, and they will decide all things about such questions in all in all Spain. And people in Catalonia, they said, well, we want to have our own Inquisition, not an Inquisition depending of Spain. And for some years there was some difference between Catalans and the king. And at the end, the king said, well, you have some kind of problems with your peasants. For many years, there was a fight between Catalan peasants and Catalan rulers and Catalan nobles. I don't know.
Nobles, yeah, it's the same word.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to decide an agreement. If you don't agree with the Inquisition, my decision will be much better for peasants. And ruling classes in Catalonia, at the end, they decided, okay, Inquisition, because I want to defend my position in front of peasants. So this question, this situation of ruling classes that during many times in Catalonia decided to be under political rule of Spain, because they want to defend their position, their class position. So nowadays we have the same problem, because many of the ruling class in Catalonia, they defend the statu quo. They defend the actual situation because it's much better for them. And middle classes and new rulers, new enterprises, export enterprises, and middle classes and working classes are defending the independence of Catalonia because it will be much better for all.
Okay, and that brings me to the next landmark in the Catalonian history that I saw, which was Pau Claris in 1640, I believe. Catalonia rose up in rebellion with the aid of France, and they attempted to separate from Spain. And I think for a short period of time, they were a republic. I think it's very conspicuous that at the same time, the British were going through a republican era. Do you think that the figure of Pau Claris still has a lot of power in Catalonian society?
A lot of power. Well, Catalonian society and Catalonian organization has been during the times quite democratic. We are speaking about 17th century, so democratic in that sense, in that period. You know, many kingdoms in Europe wanted to create a unified kingdom with the power of the king very strong. And traditionally in Catalonia, the king was not so strong, and he had to agree with the representatives of people through the courts, some kind of parliament. They have to agree what they had to do. If he wanted to go to the war, the parliament, the Catalan parliament, since Middle Ages, asked for more freedom. For example, freedom for cities, freedom for commercial questions. And well, there was a tradition of agreement between the Catalan parliament and the king. This tradition is broken when in 17th century and then 18th century, Spanish kings don't want continue with this kind of agreements. There was a Spanish empire. They needed a lot of money to maintain the empire and to go to wars, and they wanted that Catalan people pay. And well, in our tradition, we had to agree how much we pay. And that was not good for Spanish kings, and they there was the conflict, there was the trouble. First in 17th century, with Pau Claris was the representative of Catalan parliament, and afterwards in 18th century, at the beginning of 18th century.
Okay, and you know, going forward, there was the War of the Spanish Succession. We call that in English. I believe there's a different term in Spanish, where this is something we don't really see in modern times. That a different dynasty was given they were given the right to take over the Spanish monarchy after the death of one of the monarchs, and it was a member of the Bourbon dynasty. In Spanish is Bourbon, and his name is Felipe the Fifth Bourbon of Spain, and he was eventually he would end entirely Catalan independence or institutional integrity. It's not really independence, but they had their own institutions, parliaments, and courts, I believe. This was in 1716 because the Catalan people and their nobility supported the other side, the Hapsburg dynasty. That's kind of not really an element of modern history, because obviously we're not dealing with monarchies as they are today. Although Spain is a monarchy, correct? They're still the Bourbon family. Then, in continuing in the same vein, this is why for many years I think that in the rest of Europe they looked at Spain as a little more backward in terms of political development, and I think that's, so far as I've read, that's why Catalonia has wanted to separate from Spain, because there were the Carlist Wars, the Carlistas, as they're known in Spain. I think, are they still around today, Doctor? The Carlistas?
No. It's, well, you mix many things.
Yeah, I know, but I'm trying to give a full picture. Americans don't really know any of this, so.
Okay, so it's very important that in the beginning of 18th century, from 1708 to 1714, there was a European fight between Spain and France for one side, and on the other side, England, Austria, Holland, and Catalonia. Because we didn't want a new king that came from France, and that was who was more even more centralist than the kings before. And we decided that we would fight with this alliance. After some years of wars, well, our allies said change of idea, because the king that we wanted for Spain became also Emperor of Austria, and England didn't want the same emperor in Austria, that was the central empire in Europe, and in Spain. So they said, doesn't matter, France and Spain can rule under the same kind of, they were family. The Spanish king was the son of Louis XIV, the King Soleil. And they said, okay, we finish war. And Catalan decided, okay, we will continue, because if we lose this war, the country will defeat completely. Because at the moment we have our own institutions, our own way to choose our rulers at the parliament, at the cities. The mayors of the cities were chosen by the people. Of course, not all the people, but some kind of democracy, similar, for example, than Holland. And we had our taxes and our incomes, and we decided how to spend it. And of course, we had our language, our laws, and we organized by ourselves. And when we lost that war in 1714, after 1 year of siege of Barcelona,
Siege. Yes,
yeah. Of Barcelona, we lost all it. We had to pay to Spanish king, as Castilla did for their fights all over the world. Our laws disappear, and we rule by Castilian laws, and our language was refused to be official and to be used by, for example, at the schools to teach children. So that was a terrible defeat. And since that moment, Catalan always thought to get again all this kind of power for themselves. It was 300 years ago. It was more or less the same time when England won Scotland, and Scotland became an English possession. It's more or less the same.
So, you know, fasting forward, I know that we weren't here to debate only history, but I'm thankful that Dr. Llarch is able to, you know, shed some more light on it. I did make some notes, but it's not the same thing as somebody who's lived there and gone through it. So going forward, 1914, apparently under the First Spanish Republic, Spain experienced a number of, I would call them, fluctuations between monarchy and republic, starting in the late 19th century. And the Spanish Republic gave them Commonwealth status, as it's been translated. I think it's Mancomunidad in 1914. And it did regain a degree of autonomy. And then there was a dictatorship, Primo de Rivera, not well known anywhere outside of Spain, who canceled that. But then he himself was I believe he either died or he was deposed. And the Second Spanish Republic, the most famous in the Western world, came to power, and Catalonia again became more of a autonomous and self-governing area. Can you speak a little about the Catalan industry that developed there, and I think it's called the Renaissance? How is it that Catalonia experienced this this Renaissance, as they say in English? It's the same word, but why is it that it became more of an open society while Spain was sort of in decline?
Well, I try to resume. At the beginning of 19th century, there were Napoleonic Wars, and Napoleon invaded Spain, and he wanted to create an empire in all Europe and North Africa, and he had some kind of modern ideas of the new state. It was something like Soviet Union. They had some ideas, but they wanted to conquer the countries. Napoleon was defeated, but these ideas of French Revolution, arrived to Spain, and during 19th century there was some kind of fights, political fights, and also real fights, war between people who was more liberal with such ideas coming from French Revolution, and people who wanted to remain like the traditional monarchy, absolutist monarchy, and ancien regime. During these years, Catalonia was always more open to the world than Spain. For example, it's easy to understand. All big capitals in Europe are by the sea or by a big river, because commerce was the most important, relationships, and so on. There's only one exception, that's Madrid, that was created in 16th century from nothing, in the middle of nothing. That was Castilian. So this mind of being closed in themselves that Spanish people have, it comes from long time. But Catalan people from the Middle Ages had not so territorial expansion, but a commercial expansion. I mean, like Venice, or in the ancient times, like Crete. There were not possessions, physical possession. There were only bases to commerce. So from that time, we have a different mind of Spanish people, more open and more connected with the world and with Europe. So since 18th century, we tried to transform a Spanish state. The succession war that I explained before was some kind of a way to say, well, this king will be better than the other, so we'll remain in Spain, but we want that Spain is ruled in this way, decentralized, and so on. And these Catalan people and ruling people in Catalonia try to transform Spain. It has been this position for 300 years.
So
Try to modernize Spain, to be that Spain is more open, more European, and more decentralized. But that's not possible. That has been impossible. And so that's why nowadays ruling people in Catalonia also realize that there's no possibility to transform Spain. And the only way for us is to be independent of Spain.
So the experience that you're talking about, under the Second Spanish Republic, they did grant a lot of autonomy, but we know that under that republic, there was a huge amount of tension within Spain, similar to all the things that you were talking about under the monarchy. And eventually there was a civil war. Catalonia, under the loyalist Spanish government, the government of Madrid, they were more of an anarcho-communist society at the time. It's known among certain people in the United States, people with a more socialist tendency. If you can remark for a short time, as long as you want, but I know we don't have all the time in the world today. But do you think that was as good as many people are romanticizing it today, or were there a lot of elements that were negative that led to Catalonia falling during the war to the forces of General Franco?
Well, in 19th century, the second half of 19th century, Catalonia was the only part of Spain that began the industrialization. Not much time after as England, only some years after England or central Paris or some parts of Germany. Meanwhile, the most of Spain was still devoted to agriculture, and there were big properties, and there was not little peasants. And so the difference of the structure, of the social structure, was then even bigger than before, because with the working class, the increased very much in industrial working class, increased very much in Catalonia, and this class was not, didn't exist in Spain. So that's why leftist movements, socialist, anarchist, and so on, had much more importance in Catalonia than in Spain. And that's why, for example, in general, Catalan society is much more progressist than Spanish society. For example, we have nowadays, in Spain, we are ruled by a party, Partido Popular, Popular Party, that it's said it's the most corrupted party in Europe. And everyone is agreeing. But for the most of the Spanish people, they don't mind about that. It's not important for them. But for Catalan people, that's important. And the main party in Spain, the party at the government in Catalonia, only has 10% of the votes. So Catalonia is a much more progressive and modern society, and that's why that explains many of the difference of our way of being, of our way of organization in relationship with Spain.
So I think the sense that I've been getting is that in many ways Catalonia is very similar to Ireland. Ireland has a very progressive, socially it's very, very progressive, although it is Catholic as well, but as is Catalonia. But socially progressive or economically progressive parties are more and more mainstream in Catalonia, although it does have a robust economy, and we are trying to get to that. I know that we've been going through a lot of history, but what was the experience of Catalonia under General Franco and his, I don't remember his successor's name, but I know that it was a lot of more of the same with Spain. So do you think that part of this Catalonian Renaissance of today is generated by the experience of the people of that region under Franquist rule?
Well, General Franco and all military people who came against Second Republic, they wanted two things. They had two objectives. First of all, social order, and to avoid socialism, communism, anarchism, and so on. And the second objective was the unity of Spain. And they were together. And even some months ago, the former king, Juan Carlos II, that was invested like, that was ruled like a king by Franco, explained that when Franco was going to die, told him, be sure that Spain remains in unit. And I mean, at the end, the unity of Spain is the objective that is for everybody, for left, for right, for dictatorship, for republic. Because you explained that during the republic there was autonomy, but it was a little autonomy, there were many conflicts, there was the war, the republic only was for 6 years, and so on. And when Franco arrived, the repression was very, very big. Physical repression and also cultural repression and repression. They tried to avoid that the economical growth of Catalonia. They tried that foreign investments. They tried to avoid that foreign investments came to Catalonia. They couldn't do that, but they tried to do it. And there was persecution of Catalan society, Catalan language, and so on. So, well, Franco died 40 years ago, and well, there are many people that still remember that time, or they remember what their parents or their grandparents explained about that time. So, well, it has, of course, some influence, but I think the reason of the growth of the independentism in Catalonia is that Catalan people, most of Catalan people, realize that doesn't matter if it's in Spain there's a dictatorship or of some kind of democracy, if there is a conservative party or there is a socialist party. Their objective, main objective, is that the unity of Spain and the social and economical structure of Spanish state is based in the possession, in the money that come from Catalonia. So, if Catalonia leaves, there will be a real problem in Spain because they cannot afford such kind of despeses, ¿cómo se dice despeses? such kind of payment.
Spending?
Spending, yes, yes. For example, Spain has the second is the second country in the world that has more kilometers of high-speed train, only after China. And they are done not because it's useful, many people use this, or no, they are done because they only connect the periphery with Madrid, and they fit Madrid. And that's the way they think about investments. Public investments are only thought to make Madrid bigger and more important. They want to be the capital of South Europe and so on. And to do that, they have no money enough. They need our money, and they need all sources that are in Spain just to increase the power of Madrid.
Okay, so we've arrived at modern times thanks to the guidance of Dr. Llarch. And of course, after 1975, Franco's regime liberalized. It was a more peaceful transfer of power. And the regions of Spain did gain a degree of autonomy. Valencia, I believe, their region has their own parliament. The Basque countries have their own parliament. There was an insurgency in the Basque country, not the subject of today. They also want to leave Spain. And we're talking a lot, of course, this is your expertise, being involved in, the economic social circles of Barcelona. This is your area of expertise. So based on my research, it says that the gross domestic product of Catalonia as a region is 200 billion euros alone, 20% of the total Spanish economy, whereas only 16% of the Spanish population is located in Catalonia. So that is, of course, proportionally higher. 25% of Spanish exports originate in Catalonia, and 23% of Spanish industries are located in Catalonia. I was trying to do a little research, but what is the main driving industry of the Catalonian region?
Could you repeat the question, please? I didn't understand.
So what is just as in America, we think of, for example, Detroit and Michigan, the main industry there is motor vehicles, producing automotives and all that. What is the main industry of Catalonia that is?
The main industry, okay. Yeah. Well, as all developed economies, industry has decreased its weight in the global economy. Direct industry, because there are many services that are not industry but work for industry. So, in spite of this, the weight of industry in Catalonia is much bigger than in Spain, and it's similar to industrial regions in Europe. For example, we have important industry and automotive. We have important industry in chemical sector and publishing, editing books. And we have done a big effort about biology and new activities related with health and biology. Well, Barcelona is an important city in Europe. Since 1992, many people that didn't know Barcelona have discovered the city, and nowadays tourism is a very important activity, and we are the first destination in Spain of foreign tourism. So these are the main sectors, and of course, public services are also important, health and education and so on.
Okay, and I was reading that this is similar to the Brexit, and I'm going to get to that topic too, Catalonia in Europe. But Barcelona is, Catalonia as a whole is called one of the four motors of Europe, along with northern Italy, and I believe central France, and is it the Ruhr Valley in Germany? Those are the four most industrialized zones of Europe. So this is not a region that is just an economic power in Spain. It's an economic power in the entire continent. So we're not talking about a really small footprint just in Spain. It's a big footprint in Europe, and you know, that's kind of why I think it's more important than people are giving it credit for right now. And I was reading that, yes, if they leave Spain, apparently, this is CNBC, this is, you know, American financial news, they're saying that one of the key issues for the Spanish central government would be negotiating a debt deal with Catalonia, how much of the Spanish debt Catalonia would absorb. What would you say? Now, I don't know how involved you are in the movement to leave Catalonia, but what would you say is the acceptable figure for the Catalan state if they were to leave Spain?
First of all, I want to say that we are 7.5 million. That's not much in relationship with the United States, but it's a medium-sized country in European Union. For example, like Denmark or like Austria, and much bigger than Czechia, Slovakia, than Slovenia, and many others. So we are not one of the biggest countries in Europe, but we are a medium size. So we have a development, as you said, middle high. So Catalonia is important in Spain, in Europe, and has a capital in Barcelona that is much more important, even much more important. And of course, Spanish debt. It depends, first of all, of there is agreement about independence. Until this moment, Spain said that they will not agree, and they will, if we become independent and they are not agreeing, they will avoid that we remain in European Union, and there will be all kinds of difficulties for us from Spain. If such difficulties are so important and there is no agreement, we have no obligation of assuming a part of the debt. So we think that for this reason, at the end, Spain will agree that we become independent, because if they have to pay all their debt and without the incomes coming from Catalonia, that will be a disaster for Spain. So they will agree. And what's the percentage? That will be fine. Well, there are different possibilities. One is the population. Another is the domestic, the gross domestic product. Another one is related with the investments that during these years Spain has done in Catalonia, and investments that generated, for example, this debt are much lower, are 8 or 9% every year, 8 to 9%, 16 of population and 19-20 of gross domestic product. So there will be a discussion about that, and there will be, I hope an agreement, because it will be the best for Spain and for Catalonia and for Europe, that the independence of Catalonia come with this kind of agreement.
Okay, and you were talking about the European Union. Now, I was a person, I know that Catalonia is in general a pro-European Union region in terms of politics, maybe some exceptions. I've personally, I've studied or followed the politics of the European Union for several years. And personally, this is just me. I don't understand why, if the Catalan people have such an issue with Madrid, encroaching on their rights, why would they want to be a participant in the European Union when you see the just the lack of transparency in the government there? You do see many of these countries, such as Hungary and Poland, they don't jibe, especially with immigration policy. Also, there are countries that they don't want to give these bailouts to Greece. You see that Greece itself is being, they would say that they're being extorted. Why do you think that it's so important for the Catalan cause to remain in the European Union?
Well, as I told you, for history, we have European and international vocation. We are an open country. We don't want to be a closed country, and we want to be independent, but independent in relationship with Spain, but interdependent in relationship with all countries of Europe. We think that the best for Catalonia and the best for Europe is this kind of confederation, this kind of union. It means that if you are not agree, you can leave, like United Kingdom did. But if you are agree, I think the advantage are much bigger than disadvantage, because there's a common market, there's a common currency, there are common laws about that make competence more open, and all small countries prefer to be open, like Holland or like Denmark or like Austria, than to be closed, because closed they have no possibilities. In the past, the size of a country was very important, because there was a market inside, and there was a market reserved to the products produced in the same country. But nowadays, it doesn't exist. So our enterprises, our firms, can be competitive and can be big and important with independence of the size of Catalan market, because our market is Europe and then the world. So for us, it's much better to remain in European Union, and we hope we can contribute to make it better and to be a point of stability and modernity in the south of Europe, where there are many problems in all countries in southern Europe.
Okay, and I think that there I see that we've talked about the similarities between the American Revolution and Catalonia, and in my opinion in Ireland and all that. But I do believe that philosophically there's a huge difference between Catalan, and I think you would agree too. Catalonia does want to be a progressive society, and it's a democratic will. You can see it reflected through the elections. I happen to be more of the conservative persuasion on economics, especially. But Catalonia does want a welfare state. They do want to be part of the European Union. So what would you say would happen? And I don't know what the status is if the European Union were to say, as they did with Scotland, no, you must remain a part of Spain in order to be part of the European Union. However, I mean, I know that Spain is not leaving the European Union, but what I see happening, and I don't know if you've expected this either, is that if Catalonia were to be accepted as a full-fledged member of the European Union, for some of these larger states, they would see that their national cohesive identity is being eroded because the identity of these countries, you know, it's not just Catalonia, it's Flanders, it's, you know, there's parts of Italy that want to separate from Italy. What is the incentive of these states to remain in Europe if you see their national unity being undermined?
Well, Europe and in general, all the states use always realpolitik. It means that all the states defend between themselves. I am a state and I defend another state. But when there is a new reality in form of a new state, the reality is so important and you cannot avoid it, and you have to make to do relations with this new reality. Just 3 or 4 days ago, someone very important on State Department in the USA said, well, after it's internal problem of Spain, the referendum, but after the referendum, we will work with the government of the state that appears. So that's realpolitik. So we have to do this step. Well, we have, because I want to remark that Catalan movement is a pacific and a democratic movement. Last independence in Europe, many of them, not all, but many of them came after a war. And after a war, well, there were new states, and the other states, well, said, you are here, I recognize you, and we work with you. So it will be very strange that if there is a pacific and a democratic movement to become a state, it would have more problems to be recognized than a new state that came from a war. So we want, as we are democratic, as we are pacific, there will be a referendum that, to be sure that the majority of Catalan population is agreed to be independent. If there is not this majority, okay, we'll try next 10 years, I don't know. But we'll obey the majority of Catalan population. So in 1st of October, we want to have this referendum, and Spain doesn't want. And during these days, an important repression, public freedoms, to avoid referendum. And there's a persecution of papers, for example. There is restrictions of freedom of assembly. And Spain, well, appears like it really is. The democratic character of Spain, it's weak. And they want to be a unique country, although they are not democratic. If I have to deny democratic rights, I'll do. The most important is the unity. That's the thought of Spain and the Spanish rulers, and not only the government, but the most of parties and the most of people. So during next 15 days, we'll have some kind of troubles because Catalan autonomic government has prepared the organization of referendum, and Spanish government tries that there's not referendum, and they are trying it without respecting personal freedoms, and that's a very important question. And I think that all democratic people all over the world should realize that Spain, when they want to defend the unity, they forget all human rights, and they increase the repression against Catalan people who only want to vote and to decide their future.
Okay, and what do you think is going to be the position? I mean, this is I've been reading a little about that repression, and you know, do you think that your opinion of Europe would be different? Let's say if the Spanish state represses the referendum, does not recognize the referendum, if the EU does not rule to recognize the referendum as being legitimate and whatever the result may be, do you think that that casts a question as to whether Europe really does value the democratic process as a body?
Well, Catalan people know that Spain doesn't want the referendum, that is forbidden. And in spite of this, today there is published an inquiry at the paper about what the Catalan people are going to do. Are you going to vote? And 60% of Catalan people say, I'm going to vote. Although they know that is forbidden by the Spanish government. So we really want
I have to go. I have somebody knocking at my door, but could we please? I'm sorry that I had to cut you off. This was very interesting, but I think my dad is here. So thank you very much to Dr. Enric Llarch. Hopefully we can catch up, and I'll talk to you later. I'll message you guys, and thanks for the time that you gave me.
Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you.
Bye.